the media is a part of the system too. Ben, when you examine what happens after these police killings, the media plays a central role in shaping the public's opinion on whether or not a police officer's use of fatal force is justified. And so, for example, when you reflect back on what happened to Winston Smith, you know, the public opinion was shaped. The public felt that it was justified almost immediately because the media published a narrative saying that this individual was a murder suspect. Well, that was false. Well, guess what? The same thing happened for Amir Locke. The Minneapolis Police Department shared a press release calling him a suspect. And he wasn't. And so these narratives that follow these police killings largely shape public opinion on whether or not these killings are justified. And they have the ability to temper the public's response. If there's not footage, you're just not going to have the same response. If there's not footage, if people cannot see with their own two eyes what has happened, you're just not going to get a response. But what my question is for media, especially the media here in Minneapolis, I have a question that I need answered by the media in Minneapolis. At what point do you consider a source to not be credible anymore? Because at this point, the Minneapolis Police Department has lied to you. The Minneapolis Police Department has withheld information in order to give you a partial narrative that paints a picture that is favorable for them. They have misled you by omitting information intentionally. At what point do you say, I can no longer trust this source? At what point do you say any information that this source gives to me, I need to fact check by a second source? I need proof. I need evidence. I need visuals, because this has not only happened one time, two times, but now here we are the third time that we have a public record of the Minneapolis Police Department either blatantly lying to the media or only sharing half of the information so that the media can paint a picture that is favorable for the Minneapolis Police Department. Pointing back to what happened to George Floyd, the Minneapolis Police Department issued a press release saying that George Floyd died of medical complications during an encounter with police. You saw the footage. You know that's not what happened. You watched the trial. You saw what the judge determined. That's not what happened. So we know that they lied on the record, and the Minneapolis Police Department, let's just say it was one bad apple, Ben. They allowed the public information officer to keep his position. Why wasn't he terminated for putting out a lie like that to the public? So now you have one instance. That's one example. Now here, look at Amir Locke. They called him a suspect and he wasn't. They published photographs of his gun without telling the media that he had a license to carry it. At what point does the media say, we cannot trust you? You give us bad information. We're not going to source you anymore. You give us only half the story. We need to fact check and verify just like we would if we were talking to somebody off the street. At what point does the media draw the line and say the Minneapolis Police Department is no longer a credible source?
Georgia, I would expand your question, your query to all police departments and all media outlets, because one of the most traumatizing things that I think I've ever encountered in this line of work was our brother out of Baltimore, I believe Freddie Gray. So many names, it's hard to get them all. But Freddie Gray, he was killed by the police in Maryland. And during the trial, the media decided to bring up the deceased, his mother's previous drug addiction. The person who was dead, not on trial, Georgia. They dug into that man's mother's drug addiction and reported that during the trial. So my question is like, if the media is there to represent the truth and justice or any aspect of journalistic integrity. Let's forget about justice. Let's forget about truth, because, I think we're living in a post-truth America. But it really does seem like a lot of these media outlets are 100% complicit with maintaining the narrative that keeps this system killing Black people every single time we look up.
You can even reflect historically on the media's role in covering lynchings. You can look historically on the media's role in inciting lynchings, right? And so how many of those same practices are still embedded in the fabric of the system of media? How many of the standards, how many of the practices, when you talk about objectivity, when you talk about being balanced and being unbiased, why is it that we'll hear about Freddie Gray's deceased mother's addiction, but we won't hear about the officer's father's abuse towards his mother? That's still actually happening currently. Why is it that we can criminalize and dehumanize Black bodies without even thinking about it twice? But then when it comes to white people who are featured in these same stories, oftentimes we're pointing to their accolades and their achievements and, how successful they were with their education career. All of these things, they continue to uphold white supremacy, and they continue to temper the public's opinion on who to love and who to hate. And that, honestly, Ben, when you look at how polarized our nation is, how divided our nation is, the media has played a central role in why and how we are where we are today.